When she smiled and said, "I'm pregnant again," something inside me finally snapped, and this time, I didn't pick up the pieces. I stood there holding my breath, forcing a smile that didn't belong to me. Everyone clapped. And everyone, without saying it, looked at me because they all knew what this meant. Another baby. Another responsibility. Another piece of my life quietly handed over to my sister. For 10 years. I wasn't just a brother, I was the backup parent, the emergency call, the unpaid babysitter. I raised her kids while she chased excuses. First child, she said, "Just help me for a while." Second time. Third time. "You're better with kids anyway." By the 6th announcement, I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt empty. "Why aren't you excited?" she asked, tilting her head. "I am," I lied. The lie tasted familiar. Pain becomes dangerous when it feels normal. My nights were school lunches and bedtime stories. My mornings were bills I never signed up for. I paid daycare fees before my own rent. I canceled dreams quietly, telling myself family comes first. Betrayal didn't arrive with shouting, it arrived casually, when I overheard her laughing with friends saying, "My brother's basically their dad." That was the moment I went silent. Silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. I stopped reminding. I started observing. I tracked everything: money, hours, favors. I wrote facts, not feelings. I learned one thing: smart revenge isn't loud. It doesn't destroy people. It forces them to face reality. The next family dinner, she made it official. "Baby number 6, she announced proudly. Applause filled the room. I joined in. Then I calmly said, "Congratulations." She laughed. "You're always so serious." "Just organized," I replied. I pulled out my laptop, a shared calendar, a budget sheet, a childcare schedule. "I can help Tuesdays and Thursdays," I said. She froze. "What do you mean you're always there?" "Not anymore. Daycare covers the rest." Her smile cracked. "Air is expensive? So is raising children," I said quietly. That's when the resistance started, tears, accusations. "She's your sister. Blood comes first." I didn't fight back. I showed receipts, numbers, timelines, every invisible sacrifice, finally visible. I didn't abandon her. I stepped aside. I canceled automatic payments and replaced them with a transparent child-only account with limits, emergencies, covered convenience. Not anymore. I stopped being the solution to problems she created. "You've changed," she said angrily one night. "I had to," I replied. I was disappearing. Weeks passed. Reality hit her harder than any argument ever. Alarms, doctor visits, sleepless nights, hers, not mine. For the first time, she was parenting without a safety net made of my exhaustion. One evening, she knocked on my door, eyes red. "I didn't know it was this hard," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I've known for years." That was the turning point. She asked for help, not for babysitting, but for planning. We built routines, boundaries, a future that didn't depend on me sacrificing myself. Slowly, she became present, tired, responsible. Months later, she called a family meeting. Her voice was steady this time. "I'm done having kids," she said. "I need to raise the ones I already have properly." Everyone looked at me. I didn't smile, I didn't celebrate, I just nodded. Today, I'm a brother again. Not a replacement parent. I show up by choice, not obligation. I sleep through the night, I breathe. People think revenge means hurting someone back. Sometimes it means stepping away and letting them carry what they kept handing to you. After that day, things started shifting. The air in our house changed. Aisha walked slower, sighed more, and for the first time, she actually looked tired. Not the playful tired from a busy day, but bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that makes you pause and notice your choices. Every call she made, every little request she sent my way, I handled only within the rules I set. My smart revenge wasn't about yelling or shaming her in front of the family. It was about letting her feel the weight of her own decisions. The first time I denied her a favor, she was shocked. "You're not helping today?" she asked. "I am helping," I said. "Just not all day every day. Only when it's fair." She was silent. That silence was louder than anything I could have said. She realized, finally, that I had been carrying her life for a decade, and I was no longer willing to disappear for her convenience. Then came the planning stage, my own life, my own rules. I started blocking time for my work, my hobbies, my friends. I started saying no to unending errands. My phone no longer buzzed every hour with emergency calls about lost shoes, homework problems, or late-night fevers. I had built a fortress not made of walls, but of boundaries. And the strange thing, the more I enforced them, the more Aisha began to flounder. She was used to me being her shadow, her invisible backbone. Now, she couldn't just call me to fix her problems. She had to plan. She had to make lists. She had to organize. And she hated it, but I didn't intervene, I just watched. One evening, she came into my room, her voice low, almost desperate. "I don't know how you did it," she admitted. "I thought I could handle everything, but it's too much." I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, I handed her a notebook I had prepared months ago, the one with schedules, budgets, routines, meal plans. "School assignments, everything. Follow this," I said calmly. Her hands trembled as she took it. "You've done this self, too?" I replied. She left without a word, but the look in her eyes told me she finally understood. I had given her no excuses, no shortcuts, no blame, just the mirror of her own life. Weeks went by, the baby was born. I helped when it was requested, but only within the boundaries we had agreed on. Aisha cried at 2 a.m., And I didn't rush over with a bag of snacks and bottles like before. She called a babysitter, called her husband, managed what she could. I watched silently from my doorway. That night she realized what it truly meant to be responsible. Over time, our family noticed the change. My parents saw that I no longer lived in constant stress. My siblings noticed the difference. Even Aisha herself began to soften, no, not soft, disciplined. She became someone who calculated, planned, and owned her choices instead of dumping them on me. Months later, she called a family meeting. Her tone was firm, clear, decisive. "I can't have any more kids," she announced. "Not until these ones are raised properly. I need time to be a mother, not just a creator of chaos." I didn't say a word. I just nodded. The room went silent. My parents exchanged glances, finally realizing what had been happening all these years. It wasn't rebellion or cruelty, it was smart boundaries and silent revenge. I had won without raising my voice, without public humiliation. I had forced awareness. For the first time, Aisha looked at me with respect, not dependency. I understand now," she whispered later alone. "I never realized how much you were carrying." I didn't respond. I simply walked away. My revenge didn't need applause, it had already worked. She would never again take my life for granted. She had finally felt the consequences of her choices. Life returned to balance. I started doing things for myself, traveling, picking up hobbies, sleeping through nights uninterrupted. The house was quieter, calmer. Aisha became a parent in her own right, no longer leaning on me as a crutch. Our relationship changed, not closer in the traditional sense, but healthier, fairer, equal. And that's the lesson of revenge I learned. Revenge isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes it's about walking away, drawing a line, and letting them stumble on the path they've forced you to build. Sometimes it's about giving the mirror, letting them see themselves as they truly are, and letting reality teach them lessons you cannot. Even now, years later, when I pass by her room and see her organizing homework, schedules, and meals, I smile quietly to myself. Slowly, painfully, but she learned. And that knowledge is far more powerful than anger, tears, or loud confrontations ever could be. People think revenge is a moment, a strike, a public showdown. But the revenge that matters, the one that changes everything, is subtle, strategic, silent. It's about reclaiming your life while letting the other person finally face the truth. And in my case, it worked perfectly. I'm no longer the unpaid parent. I'm no longer the invisible slave to someone else's choices. I live my life, and Aisha now raises her children responsibly. No yelling, no shame, no drama, just consequences, awareness, and respect earned the hard way. Sometimes I think back to that day, the day she announced she was pregnant for the 6th time. I can still hear the echo of that forced smile, the way my hands shook holding the glass. That was the beginning, that was the moment my silent revenge started. And it lasted longer than anyone expected. Because real revenge isn't instant, it's patient, it's invisible. And when it finally lands, it doesn't just hurt, it teaches. I didn't just reclaim my life. I taught a lesson my sister would never forget. And in the end, that was worth more than 1,000 words of anger, 1,000 nights of exhaustion, 1,000 tears I had held back for years. After that family meeting, life didn't instantly become perfect. Change rarely does. Aisha had accepted responsibility on paper, but the habits of a lifetime don't disappear overnight. She still struggled, missed appointments, forgotten lists, chaotic mornings, but now, the weight was hers, not mine. And every time she faltered, I stayed silent. I didn't intervene, I didn't lecture, I just observed. My revenge was quiet, strategic, invisible. One morning, I woke to the sound of crying. Not from the kids, this time it was her. I opened the door. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her head buried in her hands. "I can't keep up," she whispered. "I thought I could, but it's too much." I walked over slowly, leaned against the counter, and simply said, "Then slow down. Prioritize. Start with what matters most." She looked up, confusion and relief flashing across her face. You're not going to do it for me." "No," I replied, "I won't. But I'll guide you if you follow the plan." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of anger or entitlement. They were tears of understanding, the first genuine acknowledgement that she could no longer rely on me as a crutch. That realization, I knew, was the climax of my revenge, not humiliation, not anger, awareness. The next few weeks became a test for both of us. She had to wake up early, organize lunches, schedules, appointments. She had to pay bills on time, remember doctor visits, attend parent-teacher meetings. And I did nothing but support when absolutely necessary, always within the boundaries I had set. No shortcuts, no automatic fixes. Every mistake she made was hers to face. It wasn't easy. There were mornings when she ran late, flustered, trying to manage 3 kids at once. I heard slammed doors, shouted instructions, even her frustrated muttering to herself. But I didn't intervene. I stayed in my own world, let her carry the consequences she had always tried to put on me. One evening, she came to me defeated. "I don't know how you did it all these years," she admitted. "I thought I could, but it's overwhelming." I leaned back in my chair, calmly sipping tea. "It wasn't easy, I learned to survive. You're learning the hard way, but that's the point." Her silence spoke louder than words. She understood now. Months passed and slowly a new rhythm formed. The house became quieter, but in a way that felt alive, not suffocating. She managed schedules. She taught her children responsibility. She asked for help when truly necessary. not for convenience. And I rebuilt my life. I took up hobbies I had abandoned, went out with friends, even planned a weekend trip by myself. I slept and cooked my own meals, focused on work without distractions. For the first time in over a decade, I lived life on my terms. The ultimate confirmation of my revenge came one night when I overheard her talking on the phone with a friend. "I finally get it," she said softly. "I've been taking everything for granted. I depended on my brother for 10 years, and now I realize I can't do that anymore. I have to be a parent, not just a caretaker for him." I didn't make a sound. I let her words hang in the air. That was the victory, the moment she realized the depth of her past reliance, the cost of her choices, and the necessity of change. It didn't stop there. I had more to protect, my own future. I started saving, planning, building a life I wanted, not one dictated by my sister's whims. I declined requests that crossed boundaries, enforced my rules consistently, and slowly, my respect in the family increased. Parents noticed my self-discipline, my siblings noticed my calm. Even Aisha treated me differently, not as an endless resource, but as a person with limits, deserving of respect. Over time, I realized that my revenge had done more than punish. It had educated. It had transformed. She was no longer the careless, entitled sister I had once silently endured. She had become aware, responsible, and disciplined. And I had reclaimed my life, my sanity, and my freedom. There were moments when I questioned myself. Was I too harsh, too calculating? Did I cross a line? But each time I saw her handle a chaotic morning, navigate a tantrum, or make a tough decision without calling me, I knew the answer. My revenge wasn't cruel. It was necessary, it was smart, it was invisible power at work. And the family, they finally saw it too. Conversations changed. Comments stopped. The unspoken understanding was clear. I had done what no one else could. I had forced awareness without confrontation, responsibility without anger, and change without resentment. Years later, when I think back to that moment, the announcement that started it all, I smile quietly. The moment that should have broken me instead became the spark of my strategy, the beginning of my silent revolution. Every sleepless night, every missed dream, every exhausted afternoon became fuel for the plan that would reclaim my life. People think revenge is loud, public, dramatic. They imagine confrontation, screams, fights, tears, and chaos. But the revenge that truly changes lives, the one that alters futures, is quiet, patient, and strategic. It's the kind that lets someone learn a lesson they could never be taught through anger. It's the kind that rebalances the scales without raising a voice. And my sister, she will never forget the lesson. She learned the hard way that life doesn't owe her convenience. That children demand responsibility, not entitlement. That a brother can only give so much before boundaries must be respected. I didn't just win back my life. I changed the course of hers. I forced her to face reality without destroying our relationship. I gave her the chance to grow, to change, and to become better. And in doing so, I taught the most powerful lesson of all, that revenge doesn't always hurt, it can heal, educate, and transform. Now I live with peace, I help when it counts. I stand firm when it matters. And I sleep at night knowing that the silent, strategic plan I carried out not only reclaimed my freedom but also reshaped a decade of chaos into a life of clarity, balance, and respect. And sometimes, when I watch my sister calmly manage her children, I see a reflection of that moment, the one where she finally understood the cost of her choices, the depth of her dependence, and the necessity of change. That reflection is my victory, my revenge, my freedom. Because real revenge isn't a scream, it's a quiet force. It's a lesson that hits deeper than anger ever could. And sometimes it lasts a lifetime. Months turned into a year, and life had settled into a new rhythm. But the true power of my silent revenge wasn't just in reclaiming my life. It was in watching Aisha slowly rebuild herself under the weight of her own responsibilities. The first few months had been chaotic. I could hear the frustration, the panic in her voice, even the arguments with the kids. But slowly, methodically, she started learning the lessons I had long been forced to learn. I remember one rainy afternoon, I saw her sitting at the kitchen table with all 3 kids surrounding her. She was exhausted, hair messy, eyes heavy, but there was something different. The tension in her shoulders was there, yes, but also a focus, a determination I hadn't seen before. She was finally seeing the full picture. She was managing, she was planning. She was taking control, and she was no longer trying to delegate her life to me. For me, those moments were strangely satisfying, not because I was cruel, but because they were proof. Proof that the silent boundaries, the refusal to intervene unnecessarily, the strategy of letting her confront the consequences, were working. My revenge wasn't a punishment, it was a mirror. And finally she was seeing herself clearly. One evening, she came to me, eyes red from crying. I really tried, she whispered. But I failed. I leaned against the doorframe and said softly but firmly, "You didn't fail. You're learning. Real responsibility is hard, but it's worth it. You have to fail sometimes to understand how to succeed." She looked at me, incredulous. "Why would I be angry?" I asked. "This is the lesson I wanted you to learn. Life isn't easy, no one is here to fix it for you. And now you're seeing the truth." She sat in silence, finally understanding. The pride, the entitlement, the expectation that I would always be there, they were gone. It had been replaced by something heavier: respect for boundaries, for effort, for life itself. And that respect was the ultimate revenge, one that I didn't have to enforce. It emerged naturally. From that point, our home transformed. She began taking full responsibility for her children, waking up on time, making schedules, preparing meals. She began to manage finances, pay bills, track doctor appointments, and even plan weekend activities without depending on me. Each small success reinforced the lesson: life can't be borrowed, it must be lived. For me, it was freeing. I started rediscovering my own life, pursuing projects I had put off, spending time with friends, and finally allowing myself to rest. The constant anxiety, the endless calls, the pressure to drop everything at a moment's notice, it was gone. I could breathe again, I could live again. The real test came one weekend when Aisha had a complete emergency. A child got sick, school called, and she was alone. Normally, I would have dropped everything, rushing to fix the situation. But this time I stayed back. I monitored from a distance, ready to help if truly necessary, but I let her handle it. And she did, slowly, clumsily. But effectively. She called the doctor, managed medications, coordinated with her husband, and even comforted the child without panicking. That night she came to me exhausted but triumphant. I did it. On my own. Yes, I said quietly. You did. And that's how it should be. You needed to experience it to understand it. Her tears weren't of frustration anymore. They were tears of understanding, of growth. And for me, they were confirmation. My revenge had worked, not through confrontation, not through anger, but through strategy, patience, and boundaries. Over the next few months, I continued to enforce limits calmly. Requests had rules. Time had boundaries. Emergencies were handled fairly, not automatically. And each time Ayesha's dependence diminished. She became confident, capable, aware. And I lived my life fully, without guilt, without resentment, and without being forced to carry another person's chaos. Family gatherings changed as well. My parents noticed the shift, finally understanding that I hadn't been selfish but strategic. They saw Ayesha managing her life effectively, no longer leaning on me, and they respected the boundary I had drawn. Even my younger siblings noticed the change. The house had calm, structure, and order, and I was finally free to focus on myself. The ultimate vindication came when Ayesha called a family meeting. She spoke with authority, not whining or complaining. I will not have any more children until I can raise the ones I have properly, she said. I need to take responsibility, and I need to do it fully. Everyone looked at me. I didn't need to say a word. My silent strategy had worked. She had learned. The lesson had been delivered. And that in itself was victory. Over time, our relationship evolved. We were siblings again, not a parent-child replacement dynamic. I helped when truly necessary, offered guidance, and participated in family events, but no longer at the cost of my own life. I had regained my freedom, my voice, and my control. And Ayesha, she became the parent she was always supposed to be: capable, responsible, aware, and finally independent. Years later, when I think back to the moment she announced her 6th pregnancy, I can still feel the shock, the frustration, the overwhelming fatigue. But now I understand that moment differently. It was the spark that ignited a decade-long strategy, a plan of silent, strategic revenge. It was the beginning of reclaiming my life and reshaping hers, not with cruelty, but with patience, consistency, and boundaries. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about hitting back, humiliating, or shouting. True revenge can be quiet, it can be invisible, it can be strategic, it can educate, transform, and liberate. My revenge didn't destroy her, it empowered her. It didn't break the family, it restored balance. And it didn't hurt me, it freed me. Sometimes I sit quietly watching Ayesha manage her household with focus and care, and I smile. That silent mirror, the consequences she now bears, the lessons she has learned, they are my victory. My revenge has been complete. I didn't raise her children anymore, but I helped her raise herself. And that, I know, is worth far more than anger or confrontation ever could be. I've come to realize that revenge is not a moment, it's a process. A long, quiet, calculated effort. It's the difference between being exploited and being respected, between being exhausted and being free, between losing yourself and reclaiming your life. And when done right, it leaves a mark, not a scar, but a transformation. And that transformation is what I achieved. I didn't just take back my life. I taught a lesson my sister could never forget. She learned responsibility, accountability, and the importance of boundaries. She learned that no one can carry her life for her. And I regained my freedom, my peace, and my dignity. Every time I reflect on it, I smile quietly. Because I know the truth: the strongest revenge is not the loudest, the cruelest, or the most dramatic. The strongest revenge is the one that changes lives, silently, strategically. Absolutely. Let's take this story to a grand, cinematic ending around 1,000 words, giving it a fully satisfying resolution while keeping it intense, emotional, and fully optimized for narration. I'll make sure it's a proper conclusion with pain, betrayal, planning B, silent revenge, P, transformation to closure. Years had passed since that fateful announcement. My sister Ayesha had transformed from the careless, dependent sibling I had silently endured into someone who now carried the weight of her choices with grace, albeit imperfectly. The chaos that had defined our home had softened into structure. The endless late-night calls, the constant emergencies, the unspoken expectation that I would always fix everything, it had all ended. And yet the final act of my revenge wasn't just about boundaries or fairness. It was about proving, finally, that she could live fully with the consequences of her choices, and that I could reclaim my own life entirely. It began subtly. Aisha had grown confident in her role as a parent, but she still carried remnants of old habits. She would forget minor tasks, underestimate the energy required, and occasionally falter. But instead of intervening, I continued to step back. My silence became a mirror reflecting the reality of her actions, and every time she stumbled, she learned something new, not just about childcare but about responsibility, consequence, and accountability. One evening, I overheard her consoling her oldest child, who had been upset about being late to school. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have planned better. Next time we'll do it differently." The words struck me. The same words I had used for years on myself. Silently bearing the weight now echoed from her lips. That was the moment I realized the transformation was complete. She had internalized the lesson my silent strategy had been teaching her all these years. The final stage of my plan came when she made a critical decision on her own. The household had accumulated a minor crisis, overlapping schedules, a last-minute doctor appointment, and an unexpected work obligation. In the past, I would have dropped everything, rearranged my life, and resolved it within hours. But this time, I stayed back observing. I watched her pause, take a deep breath, and methodically work through every challenge. She called the doctor herself, negotiated schedules with her husband, organized the kids' transport, and even managed her work remotely. She didn't panic. She didn't beg, she led. That night, after the house had finally settled, she came to me quietly, her face illuminated by the soft kitchen light. "I did it," she said, voice trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "I managed everything on my own." I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "Yes," I said simply, "you did, and that's how it should be." The simplicity of those words carried the power of a decade-long lesson. No lectures, no anger, no yelling, just truth. That was the essence of my revenge, subtle, invisible, effective. I didn't need to punish her. I didn't need to create fear or resentment. I simply enforced boundaries, held space for her to face reality, and allowed her to stumble, rise, and ultimately transform. Over time, Ayesha and I reached an equilibrium. We were siblings again, but on fair terms. I helped when necessary, offered guidance when asked, and participated in family life without sacrificing my own freedom. She became a parent who was present, responsible, and self-aware. And I reclaimed years of lost energy, restored my sanity, and began living life fully. The broader family noticed the change too. Parents saw that I wasn't overburdened, that I was thriving, and that Ayesha had grown into her responsibilities. Younger siblings saw me not as a martyr but as a role model, demonstrating the power of strategic, silent action. Even extended family remarked on the change, how Ayesha had matured, how our household had found balance, and how I seemed calmer, freer, and more focused. One day, while having a quiet coffee on the balcony, I reflected on everything. I thought about the day she had announced her 6th pregnancy, the overwhelming frustration I had felt, and the years I had spent silently carrying her burdens. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about her. It was about me, about reclaiming my life, and about teaching lessons that could never be learned through confrontation or anger. It was a lesson in patience, strategy, and the power of boundaries. I also realized something more profound: revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. My plan had not only changed Ayesha but had reshaped our entire family dynamic. Chaos had been replaced with structure. Dependence had been replaced with accountability. Entitlement had been replaced with awareness. And most importantly, I had transformed my own life, moving from exhaustion to empowerment. The ultimate proof came during a family gathering. My parents praised Ayesha for her growth and independence. Her children were thriving, and everyone looked to me, not with expectation or need, but with respect. She looked at me, her eyes soft, sincere, and full of understanding. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence, her competence, and her accountability spoke volumes. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she came to my room. "I want to thank you," she said quietly. "I understand now. I never realized how much you did, or how much I depended on you. I couldn't have learned these lessons without you." I nodded. "You didn't need me to do it for you. You needed to do it yourself. That's the point of all of this." She paused, then smiled faintly. "I get it now, I finally do." And that, in essence, was the conclusion of my revenge. Not with drama, not with punishment, not with anger, but with life itself. I had reclaimed my freedom, my energy, and my boundaries. She had reclaimed her accountability, her awareness, and her growth. Our relationship, once strained and unbalanced, had been restored, not to the naive closeness of the past, but to a mature, equitable connection built on respect and understanding. Looking back, I understood that revenge is often misunderstood. People associate it with anger, destruction. But the strongest revenge, the kind that truly changes lives, is patient, strategic, and invisible. It teaches lessons, reshapes behavior, and restores balance. It is a force that doesn't harm, it educates. It doesn't punish, it transforms. And it doesn't fade, it endures. In my case, the revenge that began with frustration and fatigue ended with clarity, empowerment, and liberation. I didn't just win back my life. I reshaped a decade of chaos into a future defined by freedom, respect, and balance. And my sister, for the first time in her life, understood the weight of her choices and the value of responsibility. I still remember the glass shattering in my hands that day, the announcement that should have broken me. But instead of breaking, it became the spark for a plan that reshaped both our lives. And now, years later, When I see her calmly managing her household, teaching her children responsibility, and planning her days with intention, I smile quietly. My revenge had been silent, smart, and lasting. It didn't scream. It didn't attack. It didn't humiliate. It changed lives, ours. And that is the true power of patient, strategic, and visible revenge. Because revenge isn't about anger or punishment. It's about reclaiming your life, teaching lessons without cruelty, and letting reality shape the ones who once took you for granted. And when done right, it lasts a lifetime. I didn't just take back my freedom. I taught her the hardest lesson she would ever learn. I didn't just set boundaries. I reshaped an entire family dynamic, and I didn't just survive, I thrived. That's the power of silent revenge, the end.